Hey everyone, before we get into this next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, I want to acknowledge some supporters of the podcast, the first of which being Seth Roy from North Mountain Goshawks. And for those of you that are still in the market for a new North American Finnish or Russian parent-reared goshawk for next season, don't wait too much longer to get on the list. Birds are starting to pair up, and before too long, your time will run out to be able to have that new hunting partner for the next upcoming season. So don't hesitate. Hit Seth up at North Mountain Goshawks on Facebook, or fill out the form on northmountaingoshawks.com, or even email them at ostringer3@gmail.com and get on that list so you don't miss out on your new hunting partner for next season. Tell them we sent you. And I'd also like to acknowledge a supporter of the Extreme Performance Outdoor Network, being onX. And for those of you that aren't currently using the onX app as part of your hunting routine, you're missing out on a lot of cool features. I know I like to use it to keep track of some of my favorite hunting spots, and I've also used it in the past to scout out some potentially new hunting spots and also be able to hit up some of the people that own the property and make sure that I'm not going to trespass on their property and get permission and all that kind of good stuff. There's so many cool features that the app has, and if you've been on the fence as to whether or not to try an onX subscription, well, just know that you can use the promo code HXP20 during checkout, and you can get a discount on a subscription to onX. And just head to onxmaps.com, sign up, and know where you stand with onX. Now, on to the next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast.
She's still straight up and above these ponds, but so high that you couldn't see her with a good pair of Swarovskis, you know. And so we thought, let's drive over there and see what's attracting her attention. As we drove up towards the pond, about 50 of these ducks got up and they started swirling round. Well, immediately we could hear the reports off the GPS that she was on her way down. You know, it started at something like 2,800 meters. Is that right? No, sorry. Yes. Like a kilometre high or more, and on her way down, and then 2,200 metres, 1,850 metres, and this is going on in real time like this, and we're looking up and these ducks are flying around in the sky, and then they broke off and away they went over that side, and we've got a 360 view of this, you know, big sky country. We're out of the car now watching, and I said to my friends, watch the ducks, she's coming after these ducks.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and this episode was recorded while I was in Kearney, Nebraska for the international NAFA meet that was held this previous year, and I got a chance to sit down with a few falconers from a few different countries, and Michael Calvin was one of them. He currently resides in Australia, and we got a chance to talk about a lot of different things, and one of those things in particular was kind of the current state of falconry in Australia, and got a chance to clear up a few things and clarify a few things with him on all of that stuff. And just going to go ahead and turn things over to this conversation with Michael Calvin and let you all hear what we discussed. So here we go. Well, I'm glad you're at least feeling a little bit more human today, at any rate. I mean, you you look a little bit more rested.
Yeah, it's been a long journey, and sort of 40 hours on a plane or driving or in between flights is very taxing. And I woke up yesterday with this terrible sore throat, which is all it is, by the way. It's just run down. So excuse my voice, but this is as good as we're going to get, so we'll just go with it.
Yeah, no, it's fine. You know, I'd rather have you with a little bit of a scratchy throat than not at all, you know what I mean, here in person at any rate. So no, I appreciate you going ahead and powering through anyway, and you know, helping me make this happen. You know, I think that this is going to be another episode that people are going to listen to probably and learn something else, you know what I mean? So I'm glad that we could at least, you know, power through and try and make it happen. So
absolutely, yeah. I've got some stuff that I would like to share with people. You know, they don't understand or are not aware at all of our journey within particularly Western Australia. So this is a good opportunity to have a bit of a chat about it and get people to learn a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So remind me again, what area of the world are you originally from then?
Right. Yeah, good one, because I'm obviously not an Aussie with my accent here. So I'm from the very far northwest of England, just below the Scottish border. County is Cumbria, which is the Lake District. Most people know it's the Lake District. My hometown is a little town called Whitehaven. So we're right up there on the left-hand side on the Irish Sea coast.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, as since you listen to the podcast, you've probably heard me mention many times about how, geographically I'm a moron. So like, it's always, it always helps to kind of get somewhat of a broad, or at least a general idea of kind of where people are located at, to kind of appreciate, like I said, what people grew up around, what they are, used to, what kind of the motivations they had to, leave there if they wanted to leave there eventually and all that. But, I mean, so when did you decide to leave there?
Oh, pretty much all my life until I was 42.
Okay.
And we left to go to Australia because the rest of my family had moved there, mum and dad and brothers, sisters with their children. And as our children were growing up, and we thought we should go as well to join the rest of the family and give our kids an opportunity to live somewhere else and in a beautiful place like Perth. The journey's been great. We still love home. We still miss home terribly and try and get back as often as we can.
Yeah.
I was 42 before I went to Western Australia.
Okay. Well, and what kind of stuff were you into much of anything, or did you already kind of have like an established career or anything like that before you decided to make your move, or?
Oh, so that was a bit of a chance because, my background is in the nuclear industry. I was 25 years a radiological surveyor doing monitoring, sort of measuring and control of radioactivity in the nuclear industry, civil nuclear industry. So there's none of that in Australia. But we went there with the idea to set up our own business in green waste recycling, which was there's still good opportunities to do that there. And so, yeah, we did that, and it's worked out quite well for us. I'm still doing it now and coming close to, I'm semi-retired. I don't work all that many hours. So it's done all right, yeah. It's a big switch, a big change, but it's worked out all right, yeah.
Yeah, that's not something that I hear very, very often, for what people do for a living and all that. But, I mean, so whenever you were kind of growing up, or, I mean, was there anything in particular like that inspired you to like want to, take that kind of career path whenever you were growing up or anything, or?
No, not really. Neither of them, to be honest. I didn't particularly want to do anything or become anything professionally when I was a kid. I just wanted to get out of school and go playing in the woods and down the beach and down the river and all of that. And so when I got to sort of leaving school age, I just went in the army for 2 or 3 years because I didn't think of anything else really. And then came out of there and was lucky enough to get picked up on a new team that was starting up at the power station doing the radiological protection. So I went into that thinking a good opportunity, we'll give that a go, and yeah, it became a almost lifelong career.
Yeah. So I mean, how long were you in the military then?
Oh, just under 3 years. That first spell as a kid. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I in the U.S. here still, it's still kind of it's a voluntary thing still. I didn't know if there was some kind of mandatory thing that you had to do, or if it was just something that you electively did, or if I didn't know if there was a certain thing other than just the fact that you really weren't really sure what to do, or what your motivation was to go into it, or.
Oh, it came down to the fact that what choices did I have in front of me, and I hadn't worked as hard as I could have at school. Probably could have done an awful lot better, but as I say, I just wanted out of there. Every day I wanted out of there. So academically, I wasn't as well qualified to go on and study or even become an apprentice or anything like that. And so I just went into the army as a junior leader in the Royal Artillery, and off I went and travelled a bit and enjoyed the journey for a couple of years, yeah.
Yeah. Was there any place whenever you were kind of traveling around or doing your stint in the military that you thought that during that time that, hey, you know, I could probably live here or there? Or is there any place that you saw that you're like, I definitely don't want to live there?
Not really, no. I mean, we were mostly doing our training in the UK, which is all over it. I spent time up in the Outer Hebrides doing live firing, because we used to do surface-to-air missile firing. And I quite kind of like that, because the falconry urge was getting back into me by then, because I did a little bit of sort of falconry, if you want to call it that, when I was a kid. So I saw the wilds of Scotland for the first time when I was sort of 16, 17. And we got all over the UK, Wales to the Brecon Beacons, and did all the rough old training that sort of either makes you or breaks you. Did all of that, and some time abroad, and spent about a year living in Germany, which was great fun as a young kid with, you know, your mates going to great cities at the weekend. And so I liked all that, but I wanted to go home. I just wanted to go home.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting kind of how whenever we're younger, we are always kind of wanting to go out here, there, and everywhere and stuff. And then as we get older, sometimes it's just like, well, I think I'd rather just be at home, you know. So, I mean, every so often, you know, I get the itch to go and see new things and kind of explore and you know, meet new people and all that kind of stuff. But like in the end anymore, after I'm gone for about like a week or two or whatever, I'm kind of like, all right, well, I'm ready to see my dogs and my family again and everything else. But yeah, I think, you know, as a younger person, you know, there's a little bit more of that itch, you know. But,
absolutely, yeah. I was ready to go. I mean, I left home with a backpack at age 16, jumped on the train and went. I was on main gate guard duty with live rounds with a real threat at that time from the IRA, Irish Republican Army, at 17 and a quarter years old. And I think now I look at kids and think, wow, I wonder how they'd handle that. Times seem to have changed a little bit.
Just a smidge, yeah.
Yeah, and some of the stuff we went through in our training was, well, they call it bullying now, I think, but no, it was all good fun. but I always wanted to go back home. I never wanted to leave home. I never left to get away from home. And when we came to Western Australia, we weren't running away from anything. We went because we thought, well, we'll go and give our kids a better opportunity. But you know, I still love getting back and try to get back every year at least once. In fact, I was there 4 weeks ago, and that's probably why I'm a bit run down now, because I did the round trip then, and back to Australia for only 3 weeks, and then back out here. So, and I've been here 3 or 4 days, and I'm already thinking I want to go home, but this time, of course, home to my wife.
Yeah.
But we'll get over it, and we'll toughen up and enjoy the rest of the meet here. And then we've got a few days to travel up to northern Nebraska, and then across into Wyoming and perhaps Idaho, and back down to Colorado, and meeting falconers all the way. So looking forward to that.
Yeah.
But I'm still a bit of a homeboy.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for being able to branch out and see how things are for a lot of other people, and getting a chance to kind of meet people along the way that you normally wouldn't have ever met because of a lot of this stuff. I mean, it's a big motivation for me as to why I continue to do the things that I do, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's at the end though, I totally understand the getting run down part. It's especially whenever you know, I mean, as you well know, because it's part of the reason why you're a little under the weather yesterday. I mean, falconers especially too, they like to drink and stay up late, and they like to talk a lot, and yeah, it's a little run down sometimes.
Oh, you've hit the nail right on the head there. Everything you said describes the situation I'm in right now, you know. it's fantastic to be surrounded in every direction you look with falconers from different countries and different cultures and different outlooks and different characters, and it's great to get in amongst it. And in amongst all of that, of course, I'm recognising old friends and making new ones all the time. That's why one of the reasons that falconry is such a wonderful culture and something that's very, very dear to my heart. Yeah. And that's part of the reason.
Yeah, for sure.
However, it does... it can sometimes catch up with you, of course, when you especially get with the Irish boys and start having a whiskey or two. And
yeah, or in your case, gin, right?
Yeah. We finished a bottle of gin the other night, and yeah, that wasn't so good, but never mind. It was enjoyable at the time.
Yeah, at the time. Yeah, you know, sometimes it's not so good whenever you have to pay for it, and you regret it a little bit the next day. But yeah, I don't know. Like for me, the hangovers especially come a lot quicker and easier these days, you know, and it doesn't take much anymore.
No, and it gets worse as you get older, unfortunately, pretty much just like everything else.
Yeah, I'm already starting to have to every so often make the occasional sacrifice of, okay, well, you know what? I'm just not feeling this. I'm going to go to bed now. And, you know, ironically enough, the times that I've decided to go ahead and do that, I don't usually end up regretting it. You know, sometimes in the moment you feel like you might miss out on something, but it's not going to be any good if you miss out on the rest of a whole entire week because you didn't make a small sacrifice or something earlier in the week.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've got to step back from it now and again. You could be out there the whole time, 20 hours a day, either out in the field with these guys or in the bar or in the coffee shop or out to lunch. And wow, it's quite, it takes a toll on your body, and you got to just step back a little bit, I think, and then you're able to enjoy the rest of it. But it definitely gets a bit harder as you get older.
Yeah.
And especially after, at the end of a 40-hour journey to get here. That's tough.
Yeah. I was, honestly, whenever I went to South Africa earlier this year, I was kind of expecting to end up with some kind of, I don't know, quote unquote sickness. You know, it's just because I knew that was the longest travel I'd ever done. I mean, that was like an 8.5-hour flight on top of like a 10 or so hour like layover on top of another like 12-hour flight just to get there. And I was just like, by the time that I got there, I just remembered I don't think my body knew any remotely at all what time, day, year it was or anything. And luckily I powered through. But yeah, we each have our own, you know, trials and tribulations, right? You know,
absolutely. That's just one of the prices of living in such a remote place as Perth for me. And we want to stay there because it is a great place to live. And we're in a position now where we're able to travel a bit more. The kids are up, you know, and they're doing all good. So we've got to pay that price. I've always said the best superpower in the world would be instantaneous travel at the flick of your fingers.
Oh, yeah.
It's never going to happen, unfortunately, but it would be good, especially in my situation.
You never know.
Yeah, we'll see.
I never know. We're not there yet, true, but you never know. But, well, and so let's go back to your childhood then. And you mentioned like kind of whenever you were younger and you'd already kind of sort of a little bit, if you wanted to call it falconry, kind of dabbled in it. But I mean, what initially kind of got you, you know, interested in all this, and you know, like what was your initial kind of foray into all this?
My story is very similar to many other people who have listened to and asked the same question. And from the podcast that you've done, it's a strange thing when you hear the same theme coming through in almost everyone's story. So I can't put my finger on it, really. I don't know what it was. My mum tells me a story from when I was probably 4 or 5, certainly before school age, and she'd sent me around to Eileen's shop to go and grab a loaf. Where I come from, you can probably still do that with 5-year-old kids. Although it's a different world now, I suppose. And off I went with a shilling to go and grab the loaf and didn't come back, or not in the expected time anyway. And sometime later, it was probably not much, but enough to sort of start a bit of a panic. I just turned up and my mum said, "Where have you been?" And I apparently, because I can only recount this because of what she's told me. I was too young to remember it. But apparently to the question, where have you been, was I saw a hawk catch a bird and it flew off with it. So I followed it because I wanted to know where it lived. So there was something in there of an interest at even that early age, 4 or 5 perhaps. And then growing up, sort of 6, 7 and 8, I remember my cousin had a kestrel that he came by somehow or other. And he sort of done some basic training with it and flew it around the garden, literally around the garden. And it would go and land on the roof and come down to his glove. And so by this time I was about 8 or 9, and it was incredible. It had a big effect on me. And at the time also, you'll have heard about the film Kess, about a Northern England kid. Well, that's the background I came from. My dad worked down the pit, and we were out playing all day, and so I identified with that, and that really sort of sealed something in my mind that I wanted to give that a go and do that. So I'd be about 10 or 11 when I trained my first kestrel. And then I met my friend David when we went to secondary school at age 11. I don't know what you call it in your country, but in secondary school for us. And he had the same interests, and he lived in a little village just out of town. And so we would spend our summer holidays somehow or other coming across a kestrel and training them and flying them for a while, and I suppose hacking them back, unintentionally hacking them back to the wild, because we would inevitably lose them. And then it'd be some years later when I first got a sparrowhawk, and that became my first hunting hawk. And I remember catching my first blackbird with it. And I remember being out there, and I'd read Jack Mavrogodato's book, A Hawk for the Bush, page to page a dozen times in preparation for training this sparrowhawk. And when it eventually caught its first blackbird, I remember thinking, what do I do now? And I was within 100 metres of my house, literally, because I used to fly out the back fields. And I thought, I'll run back and read, what do I do now? Anyways, I didn't, of course, and I made into the hawk very, very carefully. And she was no problem, as it turned out. And I picked her up with this blackbird and fed her up and took her home, and I was a falconer. And that would be, when would that be? At least 45 years ago, anyway. So my journey continues on now. I cannot get away from it. I've tried, and it just keeps coming back. And yeah,
you tried, huh?
I've tried because, look, I think we've all been through some trials and tribulations with regard to the amount of dedication something like this takes. And we tend to, or many of us anyway, tend to sort of let other things, we don't prioritise them as well as we should. Relationships, work, all sorts of things. And I, unfortunately and regrettably, was guilty of those things. And I wasn't there at times when I should have been, when my kids were born and things like that. I was there, but next day I was off out with my falcon and coming back at 3 o'clock, and my wife's in hospital being moved from one ward to another, and I look back on that and think, what were you doing? But the drive and the urge to go and do that, it was just incredible at that time. It was what we like to think, some of us, a bit of a golden age of lowland game hawking in England when we were flying partridges primarily. And some of the hawking we had back then in the early 90s, right through the 90s in fact, was next level. And we still chat about it now because the partridge numbers have dropped off, and there's still 2 or 3 people in England doing that sort of level of game hawking with tiercels. But there was 15, 20 of us back then, and we used to get together for weekends or even longer. And the urge to get up and get away from my work and any other obligation that I might have had was huge. And how I kept my life together in one piece, and my career and my marriage to my wife, I look back and go, wow, you got lucky there to keep it in one piece, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, we, this, and I know you've probably heard us discuss this very thing, many times over now here on the podcast, but it really is, I think that there's special consideration in whatever afterlife you believe in for
for family members who have to put up with falconers?
Oh, it's tough for them at times, really, really tough. And we know that many falconers doesn't work out so well for them. Mm-hmm. Fortunately for me, certainly, I consider myself very lucky to that my wife sort of somehow stuck with me, and we got through that and come out the other end. And now I'm much more considerate, and in fact, not even much more. That's a bad description. Much more considerate. My falconry comes second now, because I've got my wife and growing up family, and we're going to be grandparents soon, and those things now very firmly take first place. You know, first to 10th place, and falconry is down the way. And I'm glad about that, because I still enjoy falconry around the world, and our version of it in Australia. So it's interesting, all of that sort of stuff, how people get through it or don't, unfortunately, in some cases.
We've, I think we all are aware of the fact that we tend to have a much higher divorce rate than a lot of other, demographic of people. And when it comes to, when it comes to a lot of the prioritization and just the people, I don't know, it takes special people to, number one, want to do this, or I shouldn't even say special. It takes unique people to want to even do this in the first place. And then it also takes unique people to make considerations for, the type of people like us, in their lives too. And I completely understand what you're saying. I mean, there's been things that I've probably missed, or, shouldn't have missed, or whatever, and things like that. But I think all of us have little, at least little, hopefully not huge regrets, in a lot of it, but, it's part of it. And I think we all, especially with people that get into it in different parts of their lives, it might or might not be easier, to come to those realizations sooner than others, especially for the people that get into this when they're so young, like yourself. I'm sure that there was, a different, a little bit, it took probably a little bit longer, like you said, to reach that point where you finally realize that, okay, well, this is a part of my life now where I should definitely probably make this not the top priority. But
plus, as you get older, of course, and those of us who started very young and have had a wonderful journey, it's hard to not hard to, but we don't require that same amount of stimulus the whole time. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was younger and sat around a table with some of the old famous grouse hawkers in Scotland and chatting to them and asking them, what do they fly when they get home? And they would say, well, nothing, this is our season. And I was shocked and surprised that they would be happy to go to Scotland for 4 to 6 weeks and do some grouse hawking, and that would be it until next year. And I remember, I think I couldn't believe that they could be satisfied with that. For me, it was August 12th in Scotland all the way through to February 1st on the lowland of partridges, and as many days in between as possible. But I get that now. I really do get that. So the urge, we've done so much by my stage of life, that you look more at quality time, and especially quality time with friends. And that's one of the problems that I've got. I've got some good friends in Western Australia, don't get me wrong, but I certainly miss being able to connect with my falconry friends in the UK and elsewhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And so that's why now I'm happy to just have little pieces of that now and again. But when we go home, I always connect with other falconers, and I try and get it so that that we can go in sort of November back to the UK rather than June. But now we'll probably be able to do both. But I want to go back during the season so I can nip off to my friend Nick's and go and do a bit of snipe hawking, or over to Yorkshire for some grouse hawking, or to Scotland or whatever. And I really enjoy that now, and I'm satisfied with far much less of it quantity-wise than I ever thought imaginable when I was younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of a problem, or it's a good problem to have to a degree, but I know that's kind of been something that I've kind of had to think about a lot, for myself as well too, because, fortunately, a couple of the more recent opportunities that I've had to do like international stuff, like South Africa, for example, their season is just starting when ours is ending. So I don't necessarily have to miss out. I can go and see their falconry and do recordings and stuff or whatever. And I don't have to miss out on any of my personal falconry and stuff. But like, whenever I do other things here in the States or, the same hemisphere, it's like, it comes kind of at a cost, not just for the obvious stuff, my family and other things that I do, my income but it also comes to some degree, depending on what I'm doing, at a cost of my personal falconry time as well also. And as we get older, it's just that it doesn't usually get easier at some parts of our life to make the decisions of what comes first, what comes second, even though later on, the older we get, it seems like, well, yeah, it should have been an easy decision. But whenever we're kind of still growing and maturing, I guess it's kind of like, well, yeah, I was probably kind of dumb. Shouldn't have probably done that.
You're absolutely right. and it was a good point there that you made about maturing, because we mature guys anyway pretty slowly, really. And so that was a big part of it as well. So, yeah, the maturing happened a bit late for me with regard to keeping both feet on the ground in one place for any length of time.
Well, and also, we as falconers to some degree, whether some people are way more than others, but by nature, there's a degree of selfishness that comes with it, and to have to want to give so much time to something that's never going to love you back, or whatever. But it's like for a pursuit that is so that only we can really understand. There's a lot of time that we keep for ourselves and dedicate towards getting all this stuff to work and to see it happen. And yeah, like I said, luckily we end up finding people in our lives that, they may not understand, but, they know it makes us happy. So they make concessions, whether that's for good or bad or whatever. And, like I said, I don't know. What's right and what's egregiously wrong, I guess, when it comes to a lot of those things is up for their individual people to decide.
Absolutely, yeah. We're all different.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. But yeah, so continuing on then, with your personal falconry and stuff. You said you kind of got back into it a little bit later. You said, your early 20s or something like that, or when was it?
Well, when I left the army about age 19 or 20, I immediately got back into it.
Okay, yeah.
And then took on an imprint sparrowhawk from a friend who were breeding them by then. And I flew that sparrowhawk for 5 seasons, all out on the fields, out the back of the house, typical role in northern England farmland with long blackthorn and hawthorn hedges where blackbirds would be in there, and we'd work down the hedgerow with the sparrowhawk, and most of the flights were short and sharp and unsuccessful, but we managed to catch a few blackbirds over the years. And I trained her, flew her loose, literally out the back of the house, flew her there almost exclusively for 5 winters, right through the deep of winter, going out in the snow and trying to catch these blackbirds, all under license, by the way. I used to apply to the, I think it was the Home Office back then, rather than the Department of Environment, and they'd give you a license to catch so many blackbirds because they're a protected species. But falconry being very, very valued as part of the fabric of the history of the UK, they would give you a license to do that on a certain amount. And I flew for 5 seasons, all in that one area, and eventually she got killed by a fox on a blackbird kill when I must have went right past, and went too far and realised. And on the way back, a fox jumped out on the other side of the big thick hedge in the bottom there, and I found her dead with the blackbird. So that was, and then I buried her under a rock, literally 10 metres out the back of the garden. So it was a great journey over a good few years, and I learnt an awful lot. You know, I maybe caught about 30 or 40 blackbirds over the whole journey. But wow, you learn an awful lot with the sparrowhawk. And at the time, I didn't know any of the falconers really, other than my friend David, and he was as blind and feeling in the dark as I was. And yet we both managed, and we're both still falconers to this day.
Yeah, and so then, like, over the next 20-ish years, then that you were still in the UK. I mean, did you mainly stick with short wings then, or did you kind of branch into falcons at all? Or
I didn't stay with short wings at all, really. I flew a goshawk after that. And actually had a season or two with a harrisawk. We used to go catching rabbits, which was great fun on the fells in Cumbria. But very early on, certainly by the late 80s, the bug for peregrine falcons was coming. And I remember seeing one on a block. There's a big falcon breeder in the UK, but he used to live in my county not far away, and I bought my first little merlin from him when he used to breed out of his mum's backyard, and now they've got this massive breeding complex in Yorkshire. But when I went to pick the merlin up, he had a female peregrine on a block, and it was the first one I'd seen close up, and I remember thinking, wow, just the way it stood and the way it looked, and from that moment on I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to fly these peregrines, and I want to sort of read up about it, and got the old Falcon Gentle video with Stephen Frank and Roger Upton, Jeffrey. I don't think Jeffrey was in it actually, but anyways, and I thought, wow, that's incredible, flying peregrines at grouse over English pointers on the Scottish heather. And I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And for a kid from a northern mining town with 10 pence in his back pocket, that was always going to be a tough one. So not only did that pursuit over the next, I diversified after 10 or 15 years because I had to, because it's so expensive and time consuming, but it was going to be a tough ask to do that, without, you'd got to have financial resources and time off work and all of that. But I did what I could, and I managed to, I was very lucky in that I had a friend called Peter Kirk, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. And Peter could see my enthusiasm. I was already flying a little tearsel by then. And he invited me for a day partridge hawking up in Scotland. And my tearsel flew pretty nicely, apparently. I just thought that's how they all flew. He did a sort of 300 or 400 foot pitch and weighed it on nicely. And we managed to flush these partridges, and he come down in a nice vertical stoop and killed one. And Peter was, he thought it was fantastic, and he could see my enthusiasm and my drive to want to do this. And he very kindly, he worked for the forestry company, and so they had access to small grouse moors around the borders of Scotland. And he got me a lease that lasted for 8 years on a small moor. But there was enough grouse for me and my tearsel and my little pointer. And we flew that for 8 seasons, pretty much on my own, really. But the urge by then was to go further north, going to Caithness and Sutherland, which is way up the top there in the flow country, where I'd read so much about, with those old giants of falconry at the time. And that's what I wanted to do, and I just pushed it and eventually found myself in Sutherland. This would be sort of mid to late 90s by now, and very fortunate to meet Stephen Frank. And I spent quite a bit of time hawking with him. In fact, I think from about 1995 right through until about 2003, I spent most of the last week of the season with him. Because he used to say, you should come up later in the season, no one comes up. And I said, oh, I will, And we used to scratch around for different moors, or out the back of Birkin where he had himself, and I would get invites onto places where I'd rented early in the season. And we would somehow make it work and fly falcons right up to December the 10th. And oftentimes we'd come home with 2 or 3 grouse on December 10th as well, which people who are listening and grouse hawkers know that's quite something. It's the middle of winter, and the grouse are obviously a natural prey for peregrines, but it's certainly not easy. But anyways, we did it, and Yeah, so that's where I ended up with it, really. But with my realisation that my kids are growing and I've got to keep this job going and I need to pull back from this a little bit. And so I sort of moved on to stuff I could do more local. So I explored the possibilities of partridge hawking locally and then duck hawking. So I had a few years at each, actually. And was pretty successful at it, really. I always managed to catch a few. And I was duck hawking for perhaps the last 5 or 6 seasons before I went off to Australia. So yeah, right from when I was a kid all the way through, I had this falconry journey that was very enjoyable, and I somehow made it successful with, I don't know how, because it's damned hard to do all of that type of falconry, you know, especially some kid on a very average job, comparatively speaking, and with other obligations financially as well. And that put a strain on, of course, and that's why I had to pull it back. But still managed to fly ducks and partridges locally, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you probably answered your own question, though. I mean, the reason why you're probably able to make it work was probably just simply because you wanted it to work, you know? Like it's, you know, it may seem like an obvious or kind of a cut and dry answer, but I think we as human beings, generally speaking, I think people underestimate, like, even if it's difficult, or even if sometimes the path is longer than we'd like, if generally speaking, if people are persistent and they stick with something long enough and they really do their best to make something work, you know, and apply themselves to it, more often than not, eventually people usually are successful and make things happen if they really want to. And I think the biggest thing that is the hinderer of people not being able to accomplish the things that they want is because they really don't want it as bad as they thought. And it sounds like you wanted it pretty bad, you know?
Oh, pretty bad, yeah. So, everyone who knows me knows that. And, you know, I was pretty obsessed with it. I would think nothing of, when I was doing a lot of partridge hawking, although I'd do locally partridge hawking, which was still a couple of hours out of my day, but I'd think nothing of ringing a friend in Yorkshire or Lincolnshire and making a 2 or 3 hour each way trip for one flight, which is madness when you think about it, really. Most people wouldn't even contemplate doing such a thing for 10 or 15 minutes in the air, if that. Yeah. But that's what I was prepared to do, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist in that if I set out to do something, I only ever set out to do things that I think are achievable, and which we'll probably get onto with the Australia situation. Mm-hmm. But once I set myself up to do that, I'll give it everything I've got. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, like I said, that's what usually separates the successful people from the not so successful people. And yes, sometimes there are things that just do not work out for us, but if you really, really want it to work, you know, there's usually, you know, when there's a will, there's a way. And you know, either, you know, I mean, that's a big reason why there's people that literally move just for their falconry and stuff. And, you know, they, if they see what they want is 3 or 4 hours away, then there's some people that are willing just to pick up and move right to where, so then, you know, their 3 to 4 hour commute for that 15-minute flight becomes a 20-minute commute for their 15, you know, I mean, but not everybody's able to do that. It's really up to people whether or not they want to see them be successful or not. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it sounds like you did what you needed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always thought, and quite a few people have said this, and certainly my wife has always said it, that if I had put even half as much energy, dedication, work, commitment to succeed into my career, we'd be in a mansion by now.
Yeah.
But I didn't. That wasn't my ambition, or rather, I wasn't driven by that. I was just driven to do falconry, and so I looked to get on rather than go the management chain at work, which had plenty of opportunities to do. I wanted to do the shift work in silent hours, so I could be available during the day, especially in winter when the clocks go back and you've got a short amount of time. If you're doing day shift, then that just doesn't fit with what I wanted to do. So I would sacrifice career opportunities, the whole career, even now in Australia, I only work like about 64 to 65 hours a month. And that's largely because it facilitates me being able to get away at weekends down to my cabin out at a little town called York, and go fly the falcons through the winter months. You need to be able to, you can't be bogged down with 70-hour-a-week job and still do that thing. And so I was never driven to work 70 hours. I was never driven to go to school for 20 hours a week. I wanted to be out.
Yeah. Well, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, if you really want something bad enough and you understand that certain parts of your life have to be different to accommodate that, then generally speaking, you'll make the change if you really want it bad enough, which it sounds like you did. So yeah, but I mean, so I guess, yeah, now would probably just go ahead and be a good time to go ahead and segue into, what exactly, I mean, other than your job situation, which I mean, it sounds like was kind of one of your main motivators, but I mean, what exactly brought you to Australia, and why did you end up in the part of Australia that you ended up in then, as opposed to, one of the other areas?
Oh, that's an easy one. So my family started to migrate there from the early 90s. My sister and her husband and 2 little kids went first. And a few years later, or a couple of years later, perhaps, my brother and his wife and their 2 very young children went. So now my mum and dad, all of the grandchildren are living in Australia. Because me and I didn't get married until much later, and my other sister, although she had a little boy, she was there, still living with mum and dad. So anyways, it was my mum and dad who decided, well, they wanted to be where the balance of the family was, and they wanted me to go, of course, but I said, you are kidding me, I'm not leaving this. And I meant my falconry. I'll come and visit you. See you later. And off they went. I think my mum thought I'd follow within 6 months, but I didn't. But we'd go out and visit them once a year or something, but I had no wish to go to Australia, or anywhere else for that matter, because I was still very, very driven by my falconry pursuits, and that was which way I just wanted to keep going. But of course, down the track, I got married to my wife, Andrea, and then children come along, and little Tom was born, and a couple of years later, Livy. And once they're getting to sort of, I think they were about 7 and 3 or 4, when we had a moment of realisation one evening where, and we had a chat about it, at my wife's instigation, about let's go to Australia because we've got this opportunity on the basis that I'm the last remaining member of my family not living there, so you just get given a visa pretty much. But if we got married, I think this is the first time we talked about it was before we were even married, so we weren't married, didn't have any children, and so I had to. We said, yeah, let's go and get the visa at least. So we put our wedding off for a year, because if I'd got married, then I was no longer part of, classed it for migration purposes, I was no longer part of my own family. I was part of mine and Andrea's new family, and that visa opportunity would have disappeared. So we actually put our wedding off for a year while I went over and got my visa, got it stamped, and then came back again. And the idea was just to sit on it and let it go for 5 years and see where we're at then. But we decided to give it a go and go over there, purely just because once our kids come along, it was no longer about me and my falconry. And Andrea she'd had enough. She'd had enough of it. And she just felt that she had to get me out and away from falconry, or our marriage was gone. I hate to even think about it, never mind talk about it now, but never mind. That was that's how it was, really. That's how it was. So we went there and started the new journey over there. But of course, it wasn't long until I realised there were peregrine falcons in Western Australia, and I had to find a way to fly one. And so the whole journey began again, and I ended up deeper into it, certainly not with regard to the falconry aspect, but certainly with regard to the work I had to do around that, and getting other people involved with a view to getting some support with a little group and trying to make opportunities for them. What I took on then was greater than even all of my falconry commitments back home. I didn't realise it at the time, but that's what it grew into. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we kind of fall into these narratives, you know what I mean, and find these Well, I mean, every so often we fall into these like little, tasks or kind of missions for ourselves, and it's a kind of a separate calling in a way. I don't want to make it sound too cliche or whatever, but sometimes you just don't know that there's an alternate purpose for you until you just stumble into it. So I get it. It's and it's one of those things where you realize at some point that somebody has to do something, about certain things, and if not you, then somebody. But sometimes you find that for whatever reason, at least you feel like you're a person that is a good fit for whatever task that sometimes pops up that you didn't even know that was important, or seemed like it would be important. But I guess this is a good time also then to talk about, I think there's a kind of for everybody that's not in Australia, there's a limited knowledge of how things work when it pertains to falconry in Australia. And, there's a lot of people that have been told, or at least given the impression, that it's pretty much illegal in most of Australia. And there's, just different avenues that are kind of currently trying to be taken to make it more widely available and things like that. But when it comes to where you're at, and I know that Australia is kind of divided into a handful of different states, correct?
Yes, that's right.
So is it one of those things where it's kind of like the U.S. where every state kind of has, I don't know, a certain amount of regulations that were federally implemented, but each state has kind of their own variations in some of those rules and regs? Or is it completely illegal? Or what's the update on a lot of this stuff? Because I know for me it would be nice to have some clarification on how things work in Australia. But
right, yeah, look, it's a great question, because it gives me the opportunity to explain as far as I know at this point in time. And it's still a very it's a difficult situation to even read into, because there's no clear answers to a lot of questions. But so falconry has been practiced in Australia. We know we've done some research, and we've got some historical records of it. I've dug them up, and I've actually made a little Australian archives of falconry, and we've got documentation, and we've got photographs that go back all the way to the earlier 20th century, at least probably earlier than that, because people migrated there from the 1800s, and a certain amount take falconry with them. And at that time, of course, like America, like the UK, there were no wildlife conservation laws then. So people just got on and did what they did, and nobody bothered about it. And of course, with wildlife conservation laws, the introduction of them probably in that period globally during the 50s and 60s perhaps, where falconry was done in greater numbers, and it had a much clearer and extensive history, such as in the UK. They were at the forefront of it, and allowances were made to allow falconry to continue despite these new, fairly restrictive laws. And in America, it was, I don't know much about the situation there, because I do understand, though, that it was sort of a state-by-state job. But in Australia, it's like you said before, you touched on this, you said somebody's got to do something. Well, somebody just didn't, pretty much. They just didn't. Mm-hmm. And those people who were falconers back in the day had to either transition through that by quietly going on about, carrying on what they were doing at the risk of prosecution and perhaps whatever else that comes as a result of that, or they had to get out of it. And of course, people lose the urge over years, and people pass away, and it was pretty much dying out by the time I got there. But there wasn't any legal falconry per se, not as a recreational hobby or sport, which is a word I don't like using, but most people will identify with that. So there was no legal framework for falconry. But when I looked at the laws, it was very interesting, because I couldn't work out what made falconry illegal. And I was told, well, you can't have a raptor without a license. I thought, does that make driving a car illegal? Because you can't drive a car without a license. The very fact that you need a license and there's a mechanism to get a license means that it's actually legal. You've just got to apply and convince someone to give you the license. Well, nobody had ever done that. And so, look, I had some choices. Once I found out as much information as I could, one of the first things I realised was Australia-wide just can't do this. I can't take on this job. But we can focus on Western Australia. And the reason I thought we can't focus on it, on all of Australia, is because, like you said, each state and territory has its own sort of autonomous wildlife laws. And that's right and proper, because far north Queensland is sugarcane and rainforest, and inland is desert, and then down in southwestern Australia, the opposite corner, it's rainforest, huge rainforest, and then there's everything else in between in every direction. So there's different wildlife, different ecosystems, and so it makes sense that they've all got their own wildlife laws. So to do it on a national scale, you're fighting against 5 or 6 different sets of regulations, and just doing it with one is impossible, right? Or pretty much impossible. And we didn't go down the recreational falconry route either. And that was a deliberate choice, because I've got a lot of resilience. I'm a tough sort of bloke, and I'm not easily put off something I believe in. But I know that if you run at a brick wall, you can run at a brick wall all day long, and you're definitely going to hurt yourself. And you're not likely to make a pathway through it either. So you've got to find a weak spot in the wall or a chink of light. And as it turns out, that was rehabilitation. I thought, right, falconry techniques as a rehabilitation tool is the perfect answer. And we all know that as falconers. Globally, we know that. You know, the very essence of falconry, the bird hunting to catch its dinner. And I say that specifically and deliberately, the bird catching, hunting, because is it us that's hunting, or is it the bird? Can you command the bird to hunt? Well, if you could, falconry would be pretty damned easy, eh? So I'm not sure if it's even us that's hunting. I think it's just us engaging in that phenomenal part of what is a very natural interaction between predator and prey that fascinates us so much. But certainly a perfect rehabilitation tool, where it's appropriate in the circumstances for that particular bird. You know, it may have had an injury, it may have been in captivity for whatever reason for an extended period of time and lost all its fitness. And flying around the biggest aviary in the world for some birds of prey just doesn't cut it. It just doesn't. And we know that, but some rehabilitators don't know that. They just see a bird that can fly around an aviary for 5 minutes and put in a couple of kilometres and think that's all right. And so they let them go, and great. If any of them survive, that's fantastic. But you can't do a proper, an accurate assessment of that bird's capabilities. You don't know whether its vision is impaired, or it's got a minor injury in its wings or whatever, or a deformity in its flight feathers and things like that, or its grip in its feet. You can't really assess that without really close examination, and not just a look. Falconry allows you to examine everything to the far end. And so it's a perfect rehabilitation tool. We know that. How do you get the authorities to agree to that? Because it's a job that they've got to do that they're not doing at the moment, and they've got to examine this, and someone's got to stick their head above the parapet and say, hey, this guy and these people have got a real point here. Why don't we work with them and see what we can come up with and let this happen? That's a tough one for wildlife protection agencies and their officers, because they don't get paid anymore for doing that. And it's a job they've got to take on and risk being vilified within their own occupation for doing that. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, anyways, we went the rehabilitation route. As far as is falconry illegal, I don't know. I really don't know. Certainly, if you've got legal possession of a raptor, then that's not illegal, right? And legal possession or illegal possession of a raptor in itself isn't falconry, any more than having a pair of trainers makes you an Olympic sprinter. So having the raptor isn't falconry. Nor is illegal possession of a raptor in itself is certainly not falconry either. Is the person hunting, or is the raptor hunting during rehabilitation flights or falconry? We cannot make them hunt. We can condition them and we can expose them to situations in which they may thrive and be successful. We can assist them, but they can just as well go and land on a post or fly off and never come back. So we can't command them to do anything in the way that you can with a dog, for example. So some of the laws around, you're not allowed to set one animal onto another, which are in Australia, but they're also in the UK, right? And probably in America and many other countries. That doesn't make falconry illegal there. Why would it make falconry illegal in Australia? And can we set a bird onto a rabbit or a falcon onto a partridge or a duck or a grouse? Can we really? Because if we could, wow, we'd all be damn good falconers, eh? So all of these questions make me wonder, where's the illegality in all of this? And certainly from a point of trying to do the best for a raptor in terms of rehabilitation, and then what we can get from that in terms of education of people, scientific study now, particularly with GPS, real-time GPS tracks are incredible and helped us a lot to evidence what we do. You know, we can now not tell them, we can show them. Ken Carney actually said that to me about 10 years ago when I was telling him about this journey, and he put his hand on my shoulder and looked me in the eye and he said, don't tell them, son, show them. But we were still unable to show them because they're not going to come out every day. But then GPS came along and Marshall Telemetry through Steve Lee were very kind to me, and I, well, as far as we know, we were the first, in Western Australia, we were the first people to apply real-time GPS tracking with live data, recording the flights, where you can see the fitness progression from day to day, you know, and evidence big stoops and hunting speed stoops and all of that. And that helped us because when you go to parks and wildlife officers or leaders or whatever and say, there's the data, all of a sudden they go, oh, wow, this isn't telling us anymore, this is showing us. So Kent was absolutely right with that, but it took a few years until we could actually do it. So yeah, we just carried on building, doing what we were doing under old laws that were non-specific around this, and building a history and evidence of what we do. And during that time, we also realised that they were going to change the laws eventually, so that you could only do rehabilitation under a licence, under new laws that came in around about 2016, 17-ish. So we were ahead of the game with that, and we started formulating our own written systems and protocols and our own apprentice workbook, where we evidence that someone has got suitable training in this to the very highest standards and understands what they need to do, and is it well equipped with aviaries and equipment and GPS tracking or whatever else it might be, and access to the right food and understanding. So we've got a system where we took from SAFA and some from NAFA actually, and mishmashed them together to make our own apprentice workbook. We did that ahead of time. We have things like policy statements where we talk about the use of telemetry, mounting telemetry on birds, why it's justified, how you should do it, how best to do it. You know, and we describe backpacking, leg mounting and tail mounting and neck mounting even, and the pros and cons of each and why it's appropriate for rehabilitation as well as flying any raptor. So we've got all these written systems. There's many more. There's understanding the dangers of imprinting, mal-imprinting, I like to call it, these raptors that have to go back to the wild. Because that's one of the things that people will throw at you, right? Oh, you're just imprinting them. Well, no, we're not. We're not. People don't understand the process of imprinting. Those who would criticise us, they don't understand there's a certain window for it. And we have measures in place, or systems in place rather, to avoid imprinting any birds that are taken into care during that critical development stage. I mean, we don't get many in at that age, to be honest. And if we do, we tend to put them on a hack board at Gina's place and hack them out. And she's done that successfully with a brood of peregrines and brown goshawks over the last few years, and it's fantastic work. So we got all of these systems up and running ahead of time and started presenting them and saying, look, we've got all this stuff ready for this new law coming in. And when the new laws came in, we duly applied for one of these rehabilitation licenses. We were careful, I should say, to put within our written systems wording that would support what we do. So I'll give you an example of that, is that, we want to do our falconry and contribute but contribute with it. And so what is falconry? So falconry is, according to the accepted definition, it's hunting a bird of prey on its wild quarry in its natural habitat. So we came up with our own definition of falconry for the purposes of our group, and we changed that definition. Now, that doesn't mean we're changing any definition of falconry around the world, but we had to come up with a definition that made what we do, it would work within these laws. And as far as the crux of it, if we have a raptor that has to learn to hunt or has been in captivity for so long that it would be best if it got back to hunting again before you release it, we came up with, as where rehabilitation is concerned, a statement somewhere along the lines of, and I'm reading from a paper here, where it's likely to improve the outcome in terms of survival of the raptor after release, allowing the raptor its liberty over extended periods if it's required in the circumstances. So exposing it to hunting opportunities until such a time as its hunting ability can be evidence, as consistent with survival for that species in the wild environment. It's a long way of saying falconry, right? But how can you argue with that goal with regard to allowing the bird to hunt? No one can reasonably argue with that.
No, and when you present a lot of data to a government entity and you plead your case in a intelligent way, and present, these types of facts and stuff, it may take a while sometimes for those things to be acknowledged and everything. But the point is, whenever you present all these things to, these people and stuff, they pretty much, you're putting them in a position where they have to at least consider and, give some time, effort, and thought into basically giving you an answer as to whether or not you can or cannot do something. But you're at least forcing them almost into a position where they have to at least acknowledge that you exist and you're trying to, get this to whatever degree they're, I don't know, these different things put into place or these measures or whatever. So, I mean, everything, has to start somewhere. And it looks like like you said, you've taken some pretty good measures into implementing a pretty decent plan into, what you're trying to accomplish anyway. So
absolutely. And it's taken a long time, because we did an awful lot of work prior to the new law coming out. And then when we applied for the license, that's been pretty much the thick end of, since we put the license application in and they came to see this stuff in detail and looked at some of our facilities, and we asked them to consider our license application on the basis of our written systems and protocols as well. And within that was some of this written stuff, which sort of said, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're doing. This is what we've always done. This is a right and proper and reasonable thing to do in the care and management of these birds. If you're going to have rehabilitation, then our methods are as good as any other out there. They're not the be-all and end-all, and many raptors don't require to be flown and hunted. I would say that I would say many do, actually, but you've got to acknowledge that there's other people doing rehab in a very different way, and their contribution is just as important to them, certainly, and they will definitely have some success doing that. But at the same time, that shouldn't rule out one particular way of doing rehab that clearly works. So that's been the battle all the way. And the opposition hasn't come from, to my knowledge, Parks and Wildlife. They've sort of taken on board everything we've said and been very gracious about it, and have allowed pretty much everything. When we get this license, we've got it now actually, but we haven't shared it with the falconry world because we're still sort of in negotiations about one or two of the conditions which restrict and limit our opportunity with regard to reporting beforehand where we're going, for example. Well, we can't do that. We just reasonably can't. It's too fluid to do that. So we were wrangling over that one. But at the same time, there's certainly no time limit on rehabilitation projects, because in some states it's 6 months. Well, you might get a peregrine in or whatever with smashed feathers, and 6 months is just to get it molted. So that was unreasonable. And he was to drop that, that's fine. And we don't want to stretch that out too far beyond what's reasonable, because we've got to be seen to be doing the right thing, and we're happy to be prepared to do that transparently and accountably. They've also allowed us to use GPS and telemetry and to evidence our work, whereas formerly you'd have to apply for a license to do that, each individual person, and that would have to go past a conservation panel. And that's just all hard work, too hard for people, too hard. So we said, this is what we do, this is how we do it, this is our written systems. We want to be able to do it within the group and the people listed on the license to this standard with this equipment as part of the rehab license. I couldn't believe it, but they gave us it and said, yeah, no problem. So it's not all doom and gloom, and it's not all a big battle with them. It's just that some of the things that we have to fight around just seem so ridiculous and just as hard to remove. I understand that we're working with raptors that are wild, that belong to the state or that belong to the people of the state, and we've got to be transparent and accountable. I get that. Absolutely, of course. That's why we've done it the way we've done it. And we've said, yeah, this is what we do. This is how well trained we are. This is how we oversee discipline, if you like, within the group. We're going to make sure people are doing this right, because it's going to come back to us right. We're going to make sure that everything's transparent and accountable. I keep saying that, but it's an important thing. And we're going to evidence the work that we do, and we're going to keep records, and we're going to do all this for you for free. So that's where we're at now. We're very close, very, very close. And when I see pictures of, people who didn't have this opportunity just a few years ago, not legally anyway, and now they're out there working with these birds and starting to free fly in them, build them fitness, and I'm seeing GPS tracks that we shared, and it just makes it all worthwhile. At times I'm a resilient person, and people will tell you that boy, he stands his ground a bit too much, actually, but even I've been almost driven to walk away from it a few times, almost up to the last minute. But then I think, Gina, my friend, will send me a picture with a little daughter working with a new kestrel when I was that age, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then I'll go, right, onward. Yeah. I just need a couple of days away from this, switch my phone off. Let's refocus and onward we go. Because that's the role I took on. And I wasn't going to walk away from it easily, although at times it was bloody hard. But when we're almost there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like your path is somewhat similar to kind of how parts of South Africa's had to approach things from time to time, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of time, effort, and energy, and it does take a certain degree of resilience and or stubbornness to, kind of refuse to give up on something if it's something that you truly, believe in to that degree, which, I mean, like I said, somebody's got to do something, you know what I mean, in some regard, or else nothing gets done, obviously. So
yeah, absolutely. And I would say also that the start of this journey for me personally, I'll admit this now, I would have been reluctant to say this sort of publicly out loud 15 years ago, but it was so that I could engage with my falcons or falconry in some way. And if that meant giving back in this way with regard to a little organisation with these standards and contributing to conservation through rehabilitation and education, scientific study, then so be it. And that became a bit of a realisation, actually, because now I see this as, from a falconry point of view, almost a perfect model. And so my view has changed on that, and I went through 25 years being a falconer without giving much back, really. Mm-hmm. And this is an opportunity to give something back, and I've got some really strong thoughts and points on that we should all try and give something back. So I suppose this is my hitting a six out of the park, if you like, in some ways. We've created a situation where people, albeit for rehabilitation, can use falconry, free flight, call it what you want, but they're using these techniques, which to me is part of my, it's almost a right. It's a right to me where I come from. And it's UNESCO listed as a intangible cultural heritage of humanity for a very, very good reason. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I feel pretty strongly about it. You can probably hear that through my voice.
I'm assuming then that part of the expectations that you have for yourself and, you know, giving back in some way and contributing something is probably, I mean, part of what, I mean, it sounds like your expectations are, or your hopes for what ideally makes someone a complete or a good falconer too, right? I mean, it sounds to me like you have an idea in your mind on, you know, what you would ideally like, you know, each falconer, like to see each falconer do and kind of approach their outlook on things rather than just only worrying about how they conduct themselves personally and, you know, just going and catching game with their own hawk and then calling it a day, you know? So, you know, I mean, what other things would you like to see falconers, you know, do to kind of, in your mind at least, kind of make the world a better place for us and what we do? I mean, I feel like you've kind of probably got an idea in your head of what that is, so.
I certainly have, and that has become more crystal clear as time has gone on. But it didn't enter my head until 15 or so years ago. I was like everyone else. I took it for granted, and I had all these opportunities that you still got to work hard for. But I think, first of all, what is great falconry? What makes a great falconer? And it's something that interests me, and I think about it and I chat about it to people. So I suppose it depends on how you measure great. Enjoyment is a very good measure of success. So as long as you're enjoying it without doing anything that's not so good for other people to see or hear about, as long as you're enjoying what you're doing, then that's a great measure of success, right? I think that what falconers have got to do, not they don't have to, but it would be a good thing for them to do, is to think outside the box in how they're managing and training their Rraptor. And I mean it specifically in the training and management of the Rraptor, because I believe they can do pretty much in all cases an awful lot more than we think, and an awful lot more than we can assist them with. We just need to allow them to do more, and to do that, you got to think outside the box. And all of the instructional stuff out there is fantastic, but on a personal level, you can really think about what motivates that falcon. And most of all, you've got to try and get into the bird's head, I think. And so I'm talking now about the falconry experience. How do you make it better? How do you make that flight or that outing better? So it's about enjoyment, and it's about getting into the bird's head to try and get the best behaviour in terms of its flying ability and the spectacular sort of aspect of what we do. And part of that is to try and understand what motivates the Rraptor to perform, because it's not always just food. Teasel peregrines, for example, I always got peregrines because I've got a bit of a bad case of peregrinitis, unfortunately. But teasel peregrines in the wild hunt for a significant portion of the year, not necessarily only for themselves. They do it to impress the female, and they'll choose a nest ledge and go out and catch a pigeon or a dove or a duck or whatever, or a small bird, and bring it back and say, look at me, I've got a good house here, I'm athletic, I'm handsome, and I can catch things. So it's pretty much what we do, right? You know, so try to get into the bird's head, and that's just in the case of a teasel. It's not just food that motivates him. And it's very hard to articulate what I mean by what do you do about it? Just try and think about the bird in the moment. Why is it doing what it's doing? And reward it in ways that serve, or rather reward the motivation to do better, for the bird to do better. For example, it puts in fancy stoops and shows off to the female, not because of food. So if we can recognise that behaviour in the bird, reward it in some other way, perhaps with moving or or operantly conditioning with a signal or a wave, or and get your timing right and all of that. So I'm always looking for ways to get into the heads, and I would encourage other falconers to try and do the same. So you satisfy the bird's urge and need to perform, I suppose you put it in a nutshell. And as far as females go, by the way, I've talked about males there, and particularly teasel peregrine, because it's obvious. It's easy to pick out stuff that he's doing, why is he motivated to do that particular behaviour, and it's not to do with food. As far as females of all species go, well, good luck working that one out.
You're not talking about the human species
No, I daren't. I think that those are some good points. But I mean, is there anything else, by the way, that you have to add to that, or is that to that particularly? No, not really. Just try and get into the bird's head. Is he in a nutshell? Mm-hmm. And what is motivating to do that behaviour? I suppose another easy example of what not to do, perhaps, but along those same lines is I've heard people saying that when in the case of a game hawk where they wanted to go high, wide and handsome and be positioned in a certain way to take advantage of a flush to make a beautiful vertical stoop or whatever it might be that they're looking for. And if it's lollygagging around over there somewhere, there's a reason for that. And usually it's because you've done something wrong. And yet people are very quick to say, I'm going to flush this grouse to teach it a lesson. And I don't know whether they're really having a good think about that. Which lesson are you teaching it? And is that lesson in your head as you understand it? And is that going to be picked up by the falcon or the teasel in exactly the same way? Two totally different thought processes. So that's one that I would use as an example of getting to its head. So when you do that and you flush a grouse wide to teach it a lesson, maybe you taught him to go do that tomorrow because it worked, right? He got a flush. And that, in that moment, is all that falcon sees and acts upon that. It's still a reward. The fact that it tail chased it for half a mile, didn't catch it and came back, and perhaps still got fed for coming back. So, let's do that then. Instead of achieving the goal of what you really wanted to do, mm-hmm. You're still rewarding the behaviour that you don't want to see because you think you're teaching it a lesson. Oh, that's interesting, eh? That's what I mean about getting to the bird's head.
Yeah.
Have a think about it. And it may well be appropriate to do that. And some of I flew hybrids for about a 12-year spell, 2 or 3 hybrids, and had some great falconry with them. And you pretty much get away with murder with them, in my opinion. You can make all the mistakes in the world and they'll still go up nice and high and very faithful and honest. And if I had one season left in falconry and I had to start from scratch, it would be a male Joe peregrine. So you, again, get into its head. Don't apply that to a female peregrine. Don't apply that same thought patterns because she'll kick you right in the butt.
Fair enough. Well, this is probably a good time to go ahead and get a couple good stories from you, or at least one particularly good one that comes to your mind as far as some of your most memorable moments. And I guess we can kind of come close to wrapping this up, but definitely got to get that at least one story from you. So,
I've been doing this an awful long time, and I could tell you 100, of course, and people who know me they'll tell you I can talk for England. One guy recently said to me, which I thought was really funny, gee, you could talk underwater. Anyhow, so look, I've been witness to some remarkable falconry, both with friends' falcons and hawks and my own. And I'm not going to particularly single out any of them, really. But I can say that there's been some great falconry that would blow you away, and if you weren't there, you wouldn't believe it anyway, really. So I suppose the best flights and the best days out of those, for me, those shared with others with that similar passion regardless. And if during those outings, sharing this wonderful culture that you have with friends, if that includes them appreciating what your falcon did that day and you appreciating what theirs did, and then and perhaps once or twice over the whole journey, them saying, wow, that's the best flight I've ever seen. You know, that's quite special. And so, yeah, I'll tell you about one flight because it encompasses both of the spheres of not spheres, but both halves of my falconry life up to now, in that it's still a falconry flight, but it was applied to rehabilitation, and it was with some friends in Western Australia. And we were flying a female peregrine very loosely, letting her go, watching what she did on the GPS or by eye. And after half an hour, she's way, way up in the heavens on a thermal, you know, for several thousand feet up, perhaps a kilometre high or more. And we noticed that she was hanging over what appeared to be, because we're looking over Google Maps, as people understand, and there were some ponds on the floor, like dams. And we thought, I wonder if she's seen some ducks. Look, she's been out for an hour already, and she's not making any attempt to come back to us. Let's drive over there. So we can't see the falcon, but we can see the flight track on the phone. And we've driven sort of 2 or 3 kilometres across these 2 or 3 big paddocks, gone through this gate, and she's still straight up and above these ponds, but so high that you couldn't see her with a good pair of Swarovskis, you know. And so we thought, let's drive over there and see what's attracting her attention. As we drove up towards the pond, about 50 of these ducks got up, and they started swirling round. Well, immediately we could hear the reports off the GPS that she was on her way down, like a kilometre high or more, and on her way down. And then we're looking up, and these ducks are flying around in the sky, and then they broke off, and away they went over that side. And we've got a 360 view of this, you know, big sky country. We're out of the car now watching. And I said to my friends, watch the ducks, she's coming after these ducks. And then we not only saw the final approach, we saw the last sort of, I'll put it into feet, perhaps 1,000 to 1,200 feet of the stoop as well, because we could hear it coming as well. And she came down in this stoop from what originally was perhaps a kilometre high, and she's now in view and going like a rocket with the noise, you know, the tearing paper. And she came straight into this flock of ducks and bound to one about maybe 100 feet up in the air and sailed down to the ground. We just looked at each other and went, holy cow. And we got in the car and drove off with it. And there she was with a wood duck, I think it was. And so that falcon was clearly, you know, competent by now and capable of doing something that in falconry flight terms was extraordinary. And she went back to the wild very shortly after, so tick that box as well. And that flight describes not only a great falconry flight, but falconry as applied to rehabilitation and the conservation value of it as well, and the enjoyment that we got out of it, the bonding that we got out of it, something that none of us will ever forget. It ticked every single box. So, yeah, we want that to continue. Why shouldn't it?
No, I mean, without those kind of experiences, I mean, what would be the point really in, you know, the appeal in all of this? I mean, without all these different factors, there's a reason why we put ourselves through all the things that we put ourselves through when it comes to falconry in general, and why we like it so much. And I know for me, without being able to check as many of those boxes as possible, it wouldn't be near as appealing, you know, to stay in. And, you know, I mean, I think it's great that you've been able to at least get on the track and are coming so close to being able to achieve the goals that you set for yourself, and you know, kind of trying to solidify, you know, falconry's place in at least Western Australia anyway. And, you know, I commend you for that. I mean, like I said, everybody finds out whether or not they feel that there's an endeavor, you know, that's worthwhile for them to take on. And hey, you know, I mean, kudos to you for discovering that was it for you and continuing on with it, and not making any not making any exceptions for it, you know, and you know, standing your ground. So, but yeah, like I said, I mean, I do want to get, you know, the final piece of advice from you. I mean, you've already talked about and said some pretty important things, I think, in this, but I mean, is there any other piece of advice that you would like to kind of leave to current and future generations of falconers that you can think of? I mean, like I said, you've already given, some good stuff, but this is your chance to end on the final note here, and then we can call this good.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the advice I would give people is covers both of these two things. The part of my falconry journey from a recreational point of view, the cultural heritage side, and contributing back to science and education and conservation. And so as far as just pure falconry goes, and this is the basic advice that I think we all would give to anyone, and if this is just one part of this, but find someone that does the type of falconry that you aspire to and that in your situation you can reasonably achieve. And then with respect and with gratitude and all of that towards that person, suck as much out of them as you can. And only go to other people for advice if your goals change or your circumstances change. Or when you've perfected it, and that will be probably never.
I was getting ready to say, that's never going to happen.
Yeah. Another piece of advice I'd always give to people, because I found myself in this situation as well, is don't ever take what you've got for granted. We think that it's set in stone. They're not going to pull the rug from under us. And for that reason, people are very blasé, if you understand that word,
sure.
about don't ever take it for granted. The rug could be pulled from under you. So that's one. And in that way, leading on from that, I suppose, by not taking it for granted, do something to give something back. And that can be anything as little as volunteering for a role within your club, and a tiny little role, or a big one if you want. You can go all the way from volunteering to become one of the attendants at the weathering yard for a day or two, all the way up to, something like the likes of Ralph Rogers has done all of these 50 years, or anything in between. But do something, give something back. Look for ways to give back, however small or large is what I'm trying to say, I suppose. That's pretty much about it, I suppose. That would be my advice. I've got another piece of advice that I always tell people, young and aspiring falconers. And it again comes down to that. And it's all about not allowing the rug, or doing your bit to make sure the rug's not going to be pulled from under all of us. And it's do your falconry, everything about your falconry, all of it, in such a way that is, if someone unbeknown to you was watching your every move closely, they could walk away from that and go, I can support that. I think that's a really good thing to have in your mind. And that's everything, right? It's how you are with people within falconry and outside of it. Engage with strangers, not strangers, but people who might show an interest. Engage with them, tell them about what we do. Tell them how wonderful it is and how we do work towards conservation and all of that type of thing. Present yourself well. Smile. The way you look, even the way you dress. Just try and tick little boxes as you go to give the best impression of falconry to others who may not have ever seen it before and may never see it again, but at least go away with a good impression. And that includes, just imagine that person's watching your every move, and you've got to get them to go away and say, I can support that.
Perfect. No, I think that's a really good note to end on. Then, I mean, unless you got any other last thought to add, or unless you've got any other last thought to add or anything like that. I mean, I'm pretty good with ending on that note. And thank you again for clarifying and sharing a lot of what you've personally been trying to do in Australia. And I think that's probably going to clarify a lot of things for a lot of people, and kind of just answer a lot of questions as to for the people that are curious about how things work in other countries, especially countries where it seems to be there's a lot of continued misperceptions or gray area type deals and stuff like that. I mean, I think that was a really good overview. So, I mean, appreciate you sharing that and for taking the time with the borderline continued hungover, symptoms and scratchy voice and jet lag and everything. Like I said, it's much appreciated. So.
Right. Well, I suppose I can finish that off with just saying that, first of all, sorry for my voice, but I suppose plenty of people are tired of listening to me anyway, so that's maybe a bonus for them that I can't talk as well as I normally do. But also, thanks for the opportunity, for allowing me to sit here with you and discuss these things and get it out there on the record, and hopefully it'll enlighten a few people. Perhaps it might even give people encouragement to contribute back and look outside their own little aims and goals and what they can do for the greater good of falconry, both in the local community, in the club, nationally, or even globally. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
No, you're very welcome. And hopefully sometime we can figure out a way to finagle some kind of, Australian, little series or something, and figure out a way to get out there sometime and, bring even more light to how things are done there. And I know Australia for me is still on the bucket list of places to go. So I'd very much like to go ahead and check it out sometime. But anyway, yeah.
Absolutely. On that note, and the final note is that you're more than welcome, not just you, all of these people have been so nice to us and welcomed us, and a bit overwhelmed by it, to be honest, the kindness of these people in NAFA. And so we're happy to return that on a much smaller scale, of course. But if anybody wants to come out Western Australia and around the rest of Australia, get in touch. We can take you out and take you to my cabin, which is fantastic, and go and do a bit of this rehab falconry and come and see what it's all about and see a different place, a different country, a different climate and the challenges that presents. But it's all interesting stuff. So if anyone's ever gone Perth way, be sure to look us up, through our association or me personally. I'm easy to find in the falconry world. Please do and let us know. And we'll get you out there and have a better look for yourself.
Cool. Is there a particular website or anything that people can check out? Or
so our website with the group is sort of on hold at the moment because we really want to tick all the boxes before we put that back out there. But it will be coming back up, and it'll be no doubt the Rraptor Flyers Association of Western Australia, whatever.com. I'm not sure how you do websites, but it's the Rraptor Flyers Association of Western Australia. Failing that, just ask any falconer about this mad guy, Michael Calvin, and you'll soon find your way to me, one way or the other.
All right, sounds good. Well, like I said, thank you again, and I guess it's time to see what else is going to transpire for the evening here. I know I'm empty. My cup's empty here, so I need to get me another drink. And we'll talk some more. And like I said, worst case scenario, I'll see you again soon. Hopefully, maybe we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
All right.
Really appreciate it.
All right, appreciate you. Thank you.